running the bus. So I took the bus and trailer down there, and then Katie brought me home. And
So that have you been there before, Falls?
oh yeah, I've had classes there.
I meant with the bus and the.
No, but they're mostly the same local people, about 100 people or so. So I didn't really care to do it, but John was going to be there anyway. So I'm like, oh, all right, fine, won't cost us anything. If you guys will run it, that's fine. I got to juggle other things.
Okay, so Star Trek attributes: control, daring, fitness, insight, presence, and reason.
They also have something called the momentum system, which is like one thing feeds another and things kind of get carried. Again, I'm new to it. I don't know anything about it yet.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm always looking for any behavior modification features in it too. So we'll see if it has any of those.
Right.
So we'll be evaluating for the first time tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. We are streaming. We are live. We have an excellent connection. We can watch for anybody posting in the chat here. So, hello and welcome to the Tolkien Society. Thank you. Hello, I'm the founder of this organization, and we meet every Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. My name's Hawk Robinson, and today is May 18th.
Yep, that's right.
2019. We've been doing this for years and years and years. We have years of these videos on our channel, and Tolkien Moot this year is pushed off to September. We'll talk about that. Anyway, introduce yourselves, and then we'll call the meeting to order.
Hello, I'm Brian, secretary of this smile.
I'm Corey.
Smile of the UK Tolkien Society.
This is the official smile of the smile.
Okay.
That's actually a smile.
I was wondering if you were the Secretary of Defense.
The fence, the walls, everything. Sure.
Yeah.
No, the Secretary.
You want to introduce yourself, Corey? You introduced himself. You want to introduce yourself?
Yes, we're doing names again, Richard.
I already introduced myself.
Okay, that is Richard over there.
I'm Richard. I just wandered off the street one time and they let me stay.
And then kick him out after 2 hours every
Yeah, he doesn't let me stay that long.
Yeah, 2 hours a month.
No feeding implied.
Talking about couch surfing. He's got a month-long ski circuit.
That'd be a sweet deal.
No, I've had to couch surf when I was young. No, it's not a sweet deal.
There's the gig economy and there's the couch economy.
It's better than the park bench, but.
You just search each couch you're in to see if there's change.
All right, well, let's call the meeting to order. I did get the meeting notes up on the website at tolkienscholars.org. I did tweet. We no longer, we'll talk about it, make sure that's in our notes today, talk about Meetup.
Okay.
So let's go and talk about last month's meeting notes, and then we'll move forward to this month's.
Very good. Yeah. Thanks, Hawk. I also want to make a point of bringing up the fact that yesterday, in the interest of the Nordic ingredients, as it were, or inspirations behind a lot of J.R.R. Tolkien's stories, yesterday was May 17th, 17. Mai, which is Norwegian Independence Day.
So is this Sheldon's flag show?
Yes or no, but it is. So it is actually Norwegian Independence Day.
Cool.
Yep. So
How much of you are you Norwegian?
I'm approximately 38%, according to Ancestry DNA. So, but my great
Approximately 38%.
my great grandfather on my dad's side and my great grandmother on my mom's side. But
Okay.
I ended up getting a lot of the Norwegian team sent down. But obviously the Old Norse myths are really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
you bet. So I'll go ahead now and
Just
share the notes for me.
One small note. I was trying to decide whether or not to buy us realistic looking bubble pipes, but it did not. I found it one moment on the internet, and then somehow I moved away from that page, and now I can't find it again.
Oh, maybe some other time. I like that. I like that of you, Corey. Okay, so here are the notes from the EA Tolkien Society of Spokane meeting in April. We had Zach, Chris, Richard, Brian, and Hawk present, as well as friends online. The first thing we did was we had a recap of the March meeting notes, and during that time we discussed Tolkien and his treatment of magic. See letters number 155 for that. Also, we talked about important articles on this topic in the Other Minds magazine, and Hawk referred us to articles by Chris Seaman, Thomas Morwinski, and Neville Percy, otherwise known as Osric, who wrote a particularly important article on or treatment of Tolkien's view of and use of magic in his Legendarium. And then we had talked about the proper relationship between awe and magic. And then finally, a reference to the two trees in the Fall of Gondolin, which we have been reading through piece by piece in one of the older versions that Tolkien wrote. And so as we're reading through that in Christopher Tolkien's recently published work from last year, The Fall of Gondolin, we came across a reference to the two trees, or a likeness of the two trees, in Turgon's palace. And so in referring to that, I shared a chart of the descendants of the two trees of Valinor, and kind of how these trees were depicted, or often in living trees that, of course, were not powerful like the original two trees in their abilities and influence and their light, but were nonetheless, these were trees which were created by the Valar, and then how each tree then is perpetuated through its own line, or I should say only the silver tree, the white tree, not the golden tree. So
Tarlin or Laurelin?
it'd be Laurelin, I believe. And so anyway, we talked a little bit about those, and of course the white tree then is the emblem of the kingdom of Gondor, and is seen, of course, on Aragorn's livery, and he takes his kingship. So that's the first point. We reviewed recap the March meeting notes. And then the next thing we did last month is that we continued reading The Fall of Gondolin, from Tuor's meeting with Turgon, which is where we had left off, to page 76, where it says, "This was the fashion." We discussed as well during our reading about how Gondolin had some kind of protection, similar to the girdle of Melian around the forest of Doriath. And so we had some discussion about this as we were reading the section where it was the early morning when it was still dark, and Gondolin was just being attacked by the forces of Morgoth and the dragons and the Balrogs, and the light of the fire was seen on to the north. So we were just getting into that part.
Kind of imagery you probably took from World War One, because you would see the glow of the artillery fire in the distance and hear the guns.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll definitely come later on. We need to make a point of talking about the new Tolkien movie as well. Mm-hmm. But as to last month, we just referred to the fact that up until that time, there had been some kind of enchantment that had helped Turgon's kingdom to remain undetected. But of course, the treachery of Maeglin allowed Morgoth to find where it was. Also, the infant Eärendil, and I do have to say today, in honor of Eärendil, I need to wear my shirt that was a birthday present from Katie.
I don't have that one though.
Because,
but I got a free one.
Of course, because we know that Eärendil was a mariner, so
anyway. I learned Washington State, so it makes total sense.
Yeah. So anyway,
that's awesome.
But he was just a young child in this story, with his parents, Idril and Tuor, and the fact that he's a little, and that he survives this attack is crucial for later. And so there's prophecies that he will have to fulfill.
Kind of interesting, because most fantasy authors only think about the current generation. They're not thinking about successions of lines.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Although that was very, for his cohort, that was very typical of was it Victorian or?
Mm-hmm.
But
not so much now. Yeah.
Yeah, but back then it was very as far as the wealthier middle class and such, and the educated class.
They thought a lot about inheritance.
Well, they had they were expected to do art like piano and drawing and stuff like that. They were expected to have an appreciation of history and literature, and they were supposed to have a clear understanding of lineages and the royal family and a big sense of history that way. So that is very appropriate to his time period.
And maybe that appeals to us since
different
we
to
know
us.
we don't have that as much.
Yeah, we definitely have
I'm
lots of
not
sense of
saying
history.
that I'm very certain of it. Obviously, you can't say that, but is it possible that it kind of reminds us of the downfall of Troy with the leftovers, the people left over from Troy, from the what is it? I'm trying to think. Anyways, where there was a young man that ended up becoming sort of like a king or whatever.
Yeah.
After they fled through tunnels or something
There's a
like
scene,
that.
yeah.
I can't think of.
I mean,
can't think of it right
With
now.
a lot of these things, of course, Corey, we would hold it loosely, so it's not a direct allegory or match. Or whatever.
Right.
I don't think that's reaching.
applicability, not
There you go.
allegory.
So I think there's a lot of applicability here because I think that's what makes these stories resonate. Now that you mention it, there is, in the remake, again, not getting into the weeds here, but in the remake of the movie Troy, you have a scene where the city is overrun, and the only way for the survivors to escape is through tunnels. So that's not unthought of. And I wonder how many other stories there are like that where you have. I mean, even to some extent, Thor Ragnarok. Again, there's this whole idea of how when you get to this point where you can no longer defend the city, then it's given that thought to how can we escape so it's not a total slaughter.
Well, I don't know, but it sounds, because I can't remember who survives Troy. Survives the downfall of Troy, but it is a young man that ends up growing up, becomes. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought it was something to do with Rome. The young man ended up becoming a big
Because
part of Roman.
Priam dies, doesn't he? I think King Priam dies.
Yeah.
And the whole idea about the fall of Troy is because the king basically has, he's run off with Helen. Helen is of Troy,
Is
isn't she?
this a movie new movie in the theaters or something?
No, we're talking about the Greek story.
I'm familiar with Troy.
I think you're referring to something in the legends, correct?
Yeah,
Remember
I'm
the
trying to
Homerian-
think of the Greek play.
Laying around there somewhere.
What's the Greek play? The famous Greek play,
Galaxy,
It'd be the Iliad.
Iliad.
Iliad. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that the survivors become significant. I think the Romans take them as a huge offshoot, saying that they were important in the Roman histories.
Well, the Romans were
Time
in
period.
syncretism, so they were saying that everybody was our ancestor.
No. It
Everybody
wasn't,
who was important was our ancestor.
it wasn't saying that it founded Rome, but that they were important.
Yeah.
Well, we're going way off.
No. I think there's. I mean, well, we talk about a lot of topics here. As long as we don't spend a lot of time on this, I think it is worthwhile to note that there are echoes throughout various epics where you have the fall of a city, and one of the key things would be to preserve the line. And so, I think what you're talking about, Corey, is Staniak.
Aeneas.
Yes.
So there's two accounts. The most familiar for the founding of Rome was Romulus and Remus, the twins who were suckled by the she-wolf as infants in the 8th century BC. And another account, set in an earlier time, claims that the Roman people were descended from a Trojan war hero, Aeneas, who escaped to Italy after the war, and whose son Iolus was the ancestor of the family of Julius Caesar. So archaeological evidence of human occupation of the area of modern-day Rome, Italy dates from about 14,000 years ago. So then they would talk about the Aeneas version versus the Romulus and Remus version. So
Roman
yeah,
stuff.
so that's what you're referencing, right? Is
Yeah,
that-
something along
yeah,
those lines.
Aeneas, Aeneas. Aeneas flees burning Troy.
Yep. So maybe, yeah, and again, it's, go ahead, Richard.
For the Romans, it wasn't important what you did; it was important what your distant ancestor did. So
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, and it was the myth of Aeneas was Greek of Greek origin, and had to be reconciled with the Italian myth of Romulus and Remus, who were born around 771 BC, if taken as historical figures.
Well, the Romans would have definitely loved any sense of continuity between the Greeks and them that would have established a sense of kind of legitimacy there. So, thanks. Interesting sideline there. So, anyway, just to wrap it up with the notes, but the Earendil surviving is key. Then we talk about the capture of Miglin, Balrogs and dragons, their natures as originally envisaged by Tolkien versus how they're depicted in later versions. So he changes that. And then we read Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien 156, the first part, because it's quite long. So we kind of left that off if you want to continue that today. We talked, and in that letter, he refers to the Smeagol character, kind of that, how Tolkien kind of came up with this, because obviously in The Hobbit, right, you have
Slinker and Stinker.
in the Hobbit you have just Gollum, but now in the Lord of the Rings it's much more in-depth development of that character with Smeagol.
No.
Yeah, exactly. So and then Gandalf. He talks about Gandalf a little bit, and then we stopped at Men Have Fallen. And then also Hawk mentioned that Other Minds issue 20 was recently published, so I have not actually looked at that, but it's worthwhile having a look at that. So good point.
You're
And then,
reading Other Minds?
if only I knew my own mind.
It's our 20th issue of doing so.
And then our next meeting will be
I
Saturday.
think it was actually 19th, not 20th.
Oh, is it 19? Okay, we'll need to change that.
I think we're working on 20th next.
Oh, okay.
But 19th was published, and yeah,
Okay.
that's what's currently available.
Our next meeting will be Saturday, May 18th, 1 through 3 p.m. at Hawk's Recording Studio, but we're not in the garage today.
Yeah, so actually the studio is no longer in the garage. Last weekend, volunteers came over and it's all back downstairs, but in a better setup, more comfortable, etc. But this is still more comfortable.
Sure. For a large group, that'd be perfect downstairs.
Actually, this will handle more people actually, but that's for a more interactive, detailed camera on each person.
Yep.
It's the full blown
Gaming and all.
For just this sharing this meeting, this more laid back version, I think works
Right.
fine.
Right.
So it's more like we're all getting together and chatting
Right.
about
Yeah. Sure.
the inklings.
Yeah.
So
Indeed. So those are notes.
okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that greatly.
should we give him a golf clap?
So has anyone actually seen the new Tolkien movie?
That'll
yet?
be
Is
in
it
the
out yet?
business. Yeah. Let's. I'm putting it down and we'll discuss it. Thank you, Corey. But before we do that, maybe we should just run through a few announcements.
Yeah, so administrative stuff. We are no longer on meetup.com. Very few people were actually using it. Like after the initial people, they just would show up when they wanted to or followed us on Twitter or whatever. Whereas I've gotten a lot of use on Meetup from our other groups. The Tolkien Society one just wasn't really getting much traction. And I have to pay, like $90 or whatever it is every 6 months or something to keep running groups, right? The person who runs groups has to pay Meetup.
You know,
You guys get to
my
join for free.
my writers group instituted the anthology so they could pay for the fees of it.
Right, so I don't receive any money for any of the meetups that I run, and I run a lot of different groups. So I can only have 3 per that, and then after that, they charge me like $10, $15 a month per group if I want more groups. I'm not willing to do that. And so I have the Spokane ASL meetup, the RPG research, and just the role-playing gaming meetup, just the role-playing game meetup for all of, it's over 900 people on that and still growing for the Inland Northwest gaming group. And then we had the Tolkien Society on there, but I let it go. I stepped down, let anybody who wanted to step up take it over. Nobody bothered. They could get a few weeks notice. You get a month notice. And nobody bothered just to even contact me about taking it over. So I let that die. and replaced it with our music, our interactive music group, Spokane Drum and Spokane Music, which is where we're going out and on Fridays and Saturdays doing. You can show up and do drum circles, open jams, things like that for community cooperative music. So that's why I replaced it with, because I'm doing a lot more with that. By the way, met with Spokane Parks and Rec this week. We are now going to be in their website catalog in a week or two. Our being the various projects like RPG research and such, but there's all this overlap. And in their fall physical catalog, a lot of the programs we're doing for youth, adults, seniors, etc. So that's a huge milestone. And I will be gone September. Now we have Tolkien Society, or Tolkien Moot in September.
Right.
And I got my birthday too, so it's going to be back to back to back in September.
You'll still be here for Tolkien Moot, right?
I'll be here for Tolkien Moot just in time because it's looking like we're going to be at ATRA in Reno.
Okay.
So that's the big National American Therapeutic Recreation Association conference. That was the next big milestone.
Right.
I've done the state, I've done the region. This is the big national conference.
Oh, okay.
And we sent 3 proposals for presentations, 2-hour presentations.
Did they accept any of them?
Well, it's not formally official, but they've been going back asking questions like, how would you feel about doing a whole half day, full day pre-conference thing, putting all 3 of those together? And so we've been working out the logistics. So they haven't formally said, but they've all but said, because now they so we're working out all the details. So still waiting for final confirmation that we're going to be there, but it's looking pretty good that we're going to be there for a full day of presentations for us in the trailer. John, Danielle, and I will all be down in the arena. So that'll be in September. So that's a huge milestone professionally for all this stuff that's going on. So no more meetup. The good news is I have a new apprentice, tech apprentice. I haven't had one in years.
Always 2 there. Master.
That was flipping through my head as soon as you said
I'm
project.
definitely a master. Yeah, when it comes to the tech, oh yeah. There's no doubt. And it's not being arrogant, it's
If you
just a
start,
fact.
if you start voicing over your laughter, so we start hearing it in the chorus.
And I may have a second one join me. It depends on how the interview goes next week. But he's been showing up. The server room is mostly cleaned out now because I gave him grunt work to start with, and but he's learning server stuff. And he's finished his degree. He just doesn't have any work experience. Right, it's the chicken and the egg problem. And this is what he wants to do for a living. And so I've given him a great opportunity. What this means for us. He's going to be all that backlog of tech stuff that I just never been able to get around to. For example, the North radio stream that's been offline for a couple of years now. We're going to fix that server and get it back up and running. All of the websites, we're going to start porting over probably to Django or something that's a lot more flexible and dynamic because the clone people are pissing me off. Sorry. The clone developers, there's been like a change of the guard. And the new clone software, which is what our websites run on, they become really mercenary and unhelpful. They're not being open source community the way they should. They're being very mercenary.
Tisk.
So they've capitalized on how great a product Clone was. It's not as great a product anymore. Security's still really good, but it's really, every time I turn around, they're like, well, you can pay us to add that feature. We can pay us to add that feature. I'm like, that wasn't the point of open source, people. So I've been looking at other options, and it looks like maybe Django, because it's also Python based, but it's much more flexible. And so he's going to be learning that, and so I'll help him do that. So we'll be slowly, our website will become a lot more dynamic. It will become, it's like 10 years old. And that will mean a lot of this stuff, like the video stream, all it will be embedded in the site. Let's go to tokenscholars.org, and everything will be there. The chat will be there, the email will be there, the streaming will be there, people being able to join us will be there, everything can just go to the website. RSVPing, all the meetup features, it will all just be on our website, the way it should be. And it's all stuff I can do, but it's time consuming, right? And I'm juggling so many projects, I just didn't have time. Well, if all goes well and he sticks around and he's committed for at least a year, he's going to learn a ton from me. He's going to get real world applied work experience people can look at. So it's a win-win. And we can get all this backlog caught up and get all stuff fixed. Chat room is coming back online, all these things. So the good news is hopefully in the coming months, we will have a much better Tolkien Scholars website.
Huzzah!
So,
The magic powers.
so his name is Nicholas. It's Niklas. Nicholas. And so all of our websites are going to get overhauled. Tolkien Moot, Tolkien Society. I'm hoping with the Tolkien Moot stuff that we'll be able to make some of the gaming more interactive with the convention, as well as when we're doing the special guests and stuff. So we'll see. I don't know if it'll happen in time for this one, but certainly by next year. What?
No, we'll talk later.
Okay. So I think that's it for the administrative stuff. We got other things on here, but I figure I'll let you do what you got first.
Great.
And of course, open the floor to any other topics that people want to cover. And I am watching in our broadcast chat room right now, so if you have any questions, you want to post or statements, please do feel free to comment away.
Quick update. So again, we're about all things Tolkien, but in as much as it's related to role playing, Cubicle 7, which is the company that's licensed currently to create Middle Earth or Tolkien, you know, his world in terms of a role playing game. They have just announced that they are releasing.
This is yesterday.
Yeah, just yesterday.
Yeah.
The second edition of the One Ring.
Tor 2.
Tor 2. So back
And-
in 2011 was the first edition released, and we play tested that, or we
We were one of the first 75 in the
Yep.
United States.
right. So that was back in the day, back in 2012, 2013. So now they're. So I was just wondering if maybe I could just briefly read from
Go
that.
for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, whereas Tor is set 5 years after the events in The Hobbit, this one's set 25 years after. So it's just before The Lord of the Rings, really. Kind of the other end of that spectrum.
Yeah. Just a minute. I'm having
And
trouble.
they've added The Lord of the Rings to the title as well, which is interesting that they added that to differentiate the earlier edition.
So everything's moving into the surface. Kind of in the political landscape, everything's moving into the surface.
Under the surface.
Well, I mean, the Gondor's kind of gearing up for war.
Oh, as far as where the situation, yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting to see how these things play off each other.
Yep.
So Cubicle 7 announces the One Ring second edition. The year 2011 saw the release of the One Ring role-playing game, Adventures Over the Edge of the Wild, our first publishing venture into Middle-earth role-playing. The award-winning game was hailed as the best way of bringing Middle-earth to the gaming table thanks to its thematic rules and focused on capturing the feel of this iconic setting.
Yeah, they did a good job. Francesco Natatello, kudos. He just did a really awesome job.
To this day, the One Ring has spawned multiple supplements and a sister line of publications for 5th edition. Adventures in Middle-earth. Players of the game have traveled far and wide across Middle-earth, from wild Rovanion and desolate Eriador to Rohan, adventuring for more than 30 years of game time. 8 years after its debut, it is the time for the One Ring to enter a new era. Today, we are very excited to announce that we are currently hard at work on a second edition of the One Ring role-playing game. So this brings players further into the twilight of the Third Age and closer to the events of the War of the Ring. It has been almost 25 years now since the defeat of Smaug the Terrible, and the hope that came with the death of the dragon has dwindled. A shadow grows in the east, and the Dark Lord's forces are mustering their strength. The Steward of Gondor has need of heroes, and great deeds await those who would answer the call. The second edition of the game will feature all new art, as well as stunning new maps created by renowned cartographer Jared Blando. Players can choose from 11 cultures and 6 callings from across Middle-earth to create their company, and their journeys will see them play a crucial role in the events leading up to the War of the Ring. This edition also features a set of updated and streamlined rules developed from years of players' feedback and design development and implemented by renowned designer Francesco Nepatello. And so here are a few things. It says basically all previous release material will be usable with the second edition.
Yeah, it's backwards compatible.
Minor adjustments. The world ahead. So here's what it looks like. And of course these timetables for Cubicle 7 are with a grain of salt. We'll see.
Yeah.
They have moved to a new website and they've moved to Ireland to get out of the issues. No, they're still EU, but I think it's the Brexit issues.
Yeah.
So they've kind of rebooted some things, delayed some other things.
Well, I love somebody's comments who said, they're really great like really great products, really bad time, or they're really bad about being on time, but they're really good at their quality.
Exactly.
So I'm okay with it being late for the quality
Yes.
they deliver.
The updates are coming. The updates are coming.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I mean, sometimes they can be a year or two.
Yeah.
Or more
pretty
behind.
bad. So between Q4 of 2019 and Q1 of 2020, they will launch the core rules and the starter set. Here are the products in development. So obviously the One Ring role-playing game, core rules, 352 pages. They're going to meld, I think, the old core rules book with
Supplements.
well, the Adventurer's Companion probably. I'm not sure.
I would hope they'd integrate all of the cultural.
Yes. Yeah, because up to this point, what we've had to do is
all those books.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because the Adventurer's Companion is all the new ones,
Yeah.
but the initial
They can
races
still
are
have all
old.
the rest of the source material separate if they
Yes. I think it's just
Put all the
putting it
classes
all
together.
together in
That's what I
one
hope
place,
they're doing, and then clean up.
which would be much easier.
I hope so.
The One Ring,
Although I still wish they do it two separate books like the original separate
Yeah.
slipcover.
sure,
The players
and
but,
Game Master.
yeah, the adventurers and the lore masters. That is always a better model.
It is a better model, I agree,
Model
because you can put stuff into the Game Master's one. And
Yeah.
the One Ring starter set. Okay, so the starter set will be to explore the Misty Mountains and reclaim the Horn of the Storm in the perfect introduction to the One Ring role-playing game.
Well, so that I don't know if you know, that's a huge pet peeve of mine about intro sets. I have been going on for months and years, really, about how bad all the intro sets are that all these publishers put out. There's only one good intro set in 30-something years of role-playing
First
games
edition.
I've seen. I've been doing it for 40 years. Nope.
Which one?
Beckme, Frank Metzer, 1982-83, Red Box Basic D&D,
Huh?
1982-83. It is the only true introduction to role-playing gaming, assuming you have no mentor, nobody else with you has played before, and you need to learn yourself. All the others don't assume that. They all assume there's somebody with prior experience, or that you're willing to read through everything, figure it out, and bumble along on your own. You know, they dumb it down to make it easier, right? But they don't really assume that you're trying. They generally assume there's a mentor or some other players, whatever. And that was 1982-83 that came out.
Right.
And so far, and I've been searching for it, and I haven't found another one like that.
Right.
And we've played through it. You literally can open the box and start playing in 5 minutes.
Mm.
And first you play solo, and you do 3 solo adventures.
Right.
Then you then have your friends play the solo adventures while you then open up the DM thing. And the DM thing, you go to page 4, and you don't have to pre-read the adventure. You just read the boxes and go through. It's a dungeon crawl, but that's exactly what you need to learn. And your friends play for the first time. It's assuming you're all new to it.
Right.
It's railroading, which is exactly what they need, the training rules. And you can run a game for several sessions for your first time, right out of the box, no prep.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
Good stuff. The Lore Master Screen and Legends of Middle-earth. A beautifully illustrated Lore Master Screen along with a 32-page collection of mini adventures that Lore Masters can drop into their games. So also Fell Foes, a dedicated bestiary containing fell foes and dangerous creatures from all across Middle-earth. Minas
They do need
Tirith.
that.
Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard. A guide to the city of Minas Tirith and its surrounding lands.
So as I was somebody asking questions, what's going on with Moria?
Yep, I'm good at that too.
Okay.
The Errantries of the King, a campaign adventure set in Gondor, written by Gareth Ryder Hanrahan, author of The Darkening of Mirkwood.
Do they have anything from the tourist office?
So this follows tours kind of typical thing where they'll have, in this case, Minas Tirith, which will be a source book.
So the Ministry of Minas Tirith Tourism.
They have
I like that.
they have a source book, and then they have Adventures, the Errantries of the King, which follows along from like Rivendell being the source book, and then you have the Ruins of the North is your adventures, and then Moria, the Long Dark, or you could say the Long Wait. Explore Khazad Dûm deep beneath the Misty Mountains in this long-awaited adventure. No kidding, for the One Ring, the Lord of the Rings role-playing game. So what they've decided to do, ever since early 2018 was when it's supposed to come out. So is with all the changes going on, and they lost John Hodgson as their artistic director.
Oh, okay.
So that's also
that
part
might
of
be
it.
part of why they're having to
I
change.
think they had to put everything on the back burner till they could kind of rejig
Get
with
new
the team.
team.
Brian, I have
The
another
team looks
question.
really good though. Yeah,
Isn't Moria more vertical, so wouldn't it be a deep lake?
maybe. Don't forget your coffee, by the way.
It's empty.
I'm just imagining
You're
these,
just tempting me, aren't you?
these hobbits bumbling around Minas Tirith, looking at things, taking pictures with cameras.
Japanese tours. I'll visit the Japanese tours in the north. The cliche 80s Japanese tours. Yeah.
Well,
It's funny.
I laugh a little bit, but who knows whether the theme park will actually happen. Remember, there were rumors. Who knows? We'll see. Okay, so this is basically the end of the update. I just wanted to share that with you and let you know Cubicle 7
Speaking
coming.
of which, Spokane Parks and Rec wants us to do camps.
Oh.
What does that mean?
They want us to do role-playing game camps. So I've always, if I had the money, I want to go buy 40 acres and make a whole role-playing game park for tabletop, live action, AR, VR, all of
There's
that.
a lot of room in Riverside Park.
Well, I can't afford to do it there.
No. But
Yeah.
I mean, like, if they
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
hey, you guys
No.
can have this,
Yeah.
you can have this area
Yes, that's
exclusively yours.
they're partnering with us. They want us to do these programs. Now, I don't have enough staff to do it this year, although we're over 60 now.
Build smaller.
So the plan is next year we'll be offering potentially camps,
Good
day
bargain.
camps and weekend camps, and yeah, they're stoked.
Good. Wow, somebody's in there.
Related to that.
Well, and Zach, who's been here before, he's now working for Spokane Parks.
Okay, this is specifically the TR department.
Nice.
Yeah.
TR. Oh, they have a
So we've been working on Tolkien themed adventures,
Yes.
like with the MDA Muscular Dystrophy Association camp, we did Tolkien themed and other things. So it
Okay.
does tie in.
And then on Amazon News, for the update on that. So according to ageofthenerd.com, there is filming for Lord of the Rings series
This
will.
is the dawning of the age of the nerd.com. Ageofthenerd.com.
So actually, filming will
Nerd.com.
commence in August in Scotland, which they will be using for filming instead of New Zealand. So
Any predicted cameras by Ness?
I don't know.
Nessie?
At this point, we don't know. Maybe.
Nessie is, picky about that.
No, Nessie will get an Elvish remake.
Doesn't really, come when called.
Yes, that's right.
Nessie,
No,
is
not dog.
Nessie must be part cat.
Possibly.
Part cat.
Water cat, water horse, more like it.
Any you ever don't like cat?
So anyway, we all know pretty much all the other news about it, but anyway, it is second age. It's confirmed, definitely. It's
For
happening.
the series.
For the series, the Amazon Lord of the Rings series, it will be during the second age. So Numenor, etc. And there's a lot of etc. in there. So
Total tangent.
yes,
Coming out the end of the month, if you look to your left there, good
good
omens. So you know about this?
I saw something.
So they're doing,
Twitch
they're
has
gonna
been
hold,
advertising it.
yeah, the end of this month. It's with from Doctor Who, the second of the reboot. Tennant, Michael Tennant is the devil, and then this other person's playing the angel, and they have to buddy up because it's the other one. So anyway, this book was co-written by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. And Terry Pratchett, as you know, passed away. He had Alzheimer's and passed away fairly recently. So apparently,
Actually, I did.
Neil Gaiman made this happen as basically the death wish of Terry Pratchett had wanted this to be a reality, and so Neil Gaiman helped make the reality for the show and everything else. So apparently that's anyway, for the fans of that, that's coming out. So that's kind of exciting. Just speaking of these kinds of shows that are out there. So and then speaking of movies and shows and media. Did any of you go watch it yet, or did you? The
Yeah.
Tolkien movie?
I have. Anybody else?
Okay.
Is it on Amazon?
No.
It's in theaters.
It
so
just
it's in
came out
theaters.
last
Okay.
weekend.
This is about J.R.R. Tolkien.
It's about the first part of his life, from basically the age of 12 up until he's about 25, and he's it ends with him being a professor.
So the family has disavowed the movie.
Yes and no. They disavowed it, but one of his
I wasn't
great
surprised.
grandsons is an extra,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think as a typical break, we would see along the lines with where they don't want to officially sanction it, but
So you saw it.
What was
I don't care about
what
spoilers,
caused them to
but
kick
others.
us out?
Well, I would say this officially on our recorded episode here. I would say that it's really worthwhile, and it doesn't give away too much, to look at two different reviews, which are very different reviews,
Okay.
to get a sense of it. And so if you were to go on to theonering.net, there's a great review of the Tolkien movie there. And then, so that's a positive or favorable review
Okay.
called A Bitter Tolkien Fan.
Okay.
And it's more about how he was really pleasantly surprised.
Okay.
And then the other article,
So he had low expectations.
low expectations, and went in very, very happy with the result. And then the Tolkien Society, on the blog, there is a review by a member of the UK Tolkien Society, of which we are a smile. And that review was pretty scathing. Yeah. So I would say that
That's usually a good sign.
It is a good sign.
Agree.
Yes, I would
So
say.
all the critics agree that it's usually awful.
Sure.
Or terrible. Or
Right. Well, I mean, I guess it goes in with expectations.
Mhm.
If you are hoping for a movie that will help people in general to realize influences in Tolkien's life and treat him with respect as an author and as a person, and yet realize that it can't tell the whole story because that's just so huge, I think they did a pretty good job.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to fall short in some different areas. There's a few bones I have to pick, but they're, for the most part, it's historically accurate with a lot of speculation thrown in
Sure.
to
Yeah.
fill in the blanks they don't know about.
Well, is it emphasizing the relationship between he and his wife?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Edith,
So the love story.
I would say
Karen
the
and
two
Lucian.
biggest elements in the movie are World War One,
Right.
and
Which
how
is
foundational, and especially his friendship with the TCBS.
Okay, so I was just saying the Inklings
Oh,
and
that
everything.
well, this would be the pre-Inklings,
The
wouldn't it?
Inklings, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
Because they all die.
yeah, well, yeah, 2 of the 4 die. Tolkien and Christopher Wiseman survive.
Yeah.
So that's no spoiler because that's unavailable. You know?
Yeah, we can talk about
Yeah.
history. I mean,
Right.
I don't know what spoilers are on a biography.
Well, I think what would be a spoiler would be to kind of go piece by piece through the whole movie.
Yeah,
I think it's worthwhile seeing. I would spend money again to go
Spoiler,
see it.
Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings.
exactly.
So I would recommend anyone to go see it that hasn't
And
before.
how far does it go till it stops?
It actually, so it ends with essentially him being back from the war and some things related to that, and he and Edith being, you know, they're not married yet, but you can tell they're
Oh,
going
so
to be
this is definitely a two-parter.
very early. And then it jumps forward.
Oh, really?
It jumps forward and actually ends with when he's a young professor, but he's married and he's got little kids.
Wow, there's a lot left out.
Oh,
they plan to do
totally.
another movie?
I don't know.
That's like a whole other half of it. That's not even his.
Nope.
All the other stuff.
Nope.
that
I
happened.
think they're just really interested in looking at the earlier part that fewer people know about, and
No
that.
one really knows about the other part either.
Well, true, but if you
I
want to
mean,
say,
we do, but
like,
most people don't.
what's going to impact this guy?
Yeah.
It's going to be this romance, and it's going to be
Right.
the
Well,
war.
it gets tragic because of her health after.
It
that.
does.
You know, it's a struggle.
Well, this is true. But I think if you're looking
But
at,
then there's his kids.
there is.
I think going forward,
Yeah,
the raising. If you want to have that human connection
very much so.
as a father,
Right.
Holy
You don't.
crap.
They only show that fatherhood piece in the last part, and it's where he's saying to them, "I'm working on this story."
Right, and they have that.
It's the lead into it.
But
But even the lead-ins are very. You will notice that they go out of their way to not name drop. They don't.
interesting.
And I
So
don't know
what
how much that
were
is.
the things that the Wondering.net really especially pointed out that they really liked?
Well, I think the reviewer on there believes that this movie will restart or renew for a number of fans that feeling that they had before even the Lord of the Rings movies came out. Because his experience was, I've been a Tolkien fan since I was 13, and really in the old sense of fan, not the fandom newer sense of fan, but
Mhm.
more like someone who loved reading
Mhm.
Tolkien's works, which is ostensibly what this this group is about as well. I mean,
Mhm.
really, but there's lots of derivative things, and so he was excited. He used to read The Lord of the Rings every year, once a year,
Mhm.
and And then when the movies came out, he was excited because there's a community of people who similarly are interested and excited. So then he stopped reading the books as much and being very much sustained by this. And then after those movies, life goes on, you get older, it's a season of life thing. And then the Hobbit movies came back and he's like, oh, good. But then was very much disappointed by that.
Yeah, and it was so commercialized.
Right, and feeling like we're just kind of living off an echo of something. It's even further distance from Tolkien and his genius and his imagination. Mm-hmm. And so really kind of bitter about the whole thing. And also seeing kind of Hollywood and the senior side of just how profit, and not that profit's wrong, but how sometimes really not being that interested in the artistry of it, but just like, hey, if we can make something into a cash cow, we will.
Sure.
So he was very
merchandising. Yogurt.
That's right. Maybe the Schwartz.
The Schwartz.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
merchandising.
But it's like for him, it was like remembering why he loved Tolkien in the first place. It's a very, even if you don't like the movie, his point is, it is a very artistic. Not a yes, and not kind of like, hey baby, let's see how much money we can get out of this. It's not. It's not like that.
That's the sequel.
We'll see.
Well,
let's open for a sequel.
The fact that the family has disavowed it, I think, is funny.
But
because
they always do that.
Well, the thing is that a writer once talked about like him. He said that he tried to write about his family one time, and that the fact is that family has a certain view on and sometimes it's almost like saying something negative at a funeral. It's you say one thing to make them look human in the sense of that they have weaknesses and so on and so forth, and then the family gets kind of uptight, like you're ruining their image or whatever.
It totally depends on the family.
Well, I don't know. Still, most of us when we go to a funeral don't usually hear the speaker get up and
depends on the family. Many of them they do roasts.
I don't got it for now.
Well, so you're saying expectations is what you're talking about, not necessarily everybody, but so relate that again. Help me understand. You're saying that feeling you might have if you're at a funeral, and how does that relate again to
how they
feel about the movie?
All I'm trying to say is that they probably have a specific way that they see Tolkien
sure.
as his grandfather, as whatever.
And it must be really strange to see a movie, I suppose, about your grandparents, and say, this is nothing like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you grew up with them, you're like, that's not right. I mean, I'm not saying that.
Do you remember that bit in X-Files where in universe they did a movie on Mueller and he ends the scene with him banging his head against the chair in front of him.
So it's
kind of like did you ever see the Stargate version where they're like, here's what's actually going on, and then there was like the TV show that was like a really crappy
extreme wormhole.
X-wormhole. Yeah, exactly. That's sometimes what I think the family thinks when they're watching the
episode 200. They had the guy came in who did the wormhole extreme thing and was pitching ideas because they were trying to do a movie.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so each of the crew gave their version of things, and one was like a zombie fight version. The other one was Kilk dominating everything. Everybody was so different. Like, wait a minute, that didn't happen like that.
The punchline of that joke was that Vala, the black hair chick, did a pitch based on Farscape. And the guy
they did the whole Farscape.
I never heard that one.
You got me on that one. I have no idea. It's usually like a version of the Gilligan's Island. And Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Right? And he's like, can't you at least come up with something original that I've never heard of? And they're like, yeah. So they're all switching. They've got Ben Browder and Claudia Black. In switched roles, though. They played different characters. So Daniel played Browder's character, and they're all switched around.
So there's a new movie that I just saw the preview for, which is about how the Beatles, as if the Beatles didn't exist, this guy he's hit with an accident. And he's basically in a time period where nobody else remembers, nobody else knows who the Beatles are. They've never heard the songs, and so he starts playing these. Everybody thinks he's amazing, but then somebody says, "Hey, you're playing our songs, but they haven't been
Right, famous
yet."
Yeah.
But I wonder if it is like that, where they're like, if the Tolkien family just is like, look, great that we're very glad, obviously doing very well because of the success of these. I'm sure they can't be that unhappy.
Yeah.
But at what cost? You don't want your family to be prostituted for it. You don't want
There isn't a lot of dirty laundry or anything, is
No,
there?
absolutely not. And actually, this
So
is
how do
why
they handle the whole Bloemfontein? Do they just talk like
They-
didn't even cover it?
they just went
or
past
him
it.
living in the squalor for a while while
Yes.
his mother was struck. They
Yes.
did cover that.
That's how they start.
Okay, and then
They-
she passes and they get adopted
Yes.
by Xavier.
Yep. Then the father takes them.
I can tell you that in my family, if I wrote down the stuff that I felt like if I tried to be as honest and objective as possible,
Yeah.
there would be there would be
You don't want that kind of
burning.
trouble.
There would be families parts of the family that would
Effigies of
be
Corey.
burning. Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Well, that's what every writer faces if they're
You're in
trying
enough
to write
trouble
about
as it
something
is. Why
that's
would you want to encourage it?
Yeah, it's a good way to become very alone. To write about your family.
Tolkien's solution is just to write about things that are
Mythical,
centuries.
exactly.
See, this is the reason why I believe that fiction is more important than fact.
Yeah.
Because
Safer.
I don't have any interest in getting burned at the stake.
Okay.
I would say fiction is safer than fact.
So we've made references to X-Files and Stargate. This is pretty good. So, yeah.
And fire. Yeah, you got it. Never mind.
Okay. So, yes, if
And
you
Stargate.
if you haven't heard of it yet or haven't seen it yet or whatever, please go see Tolkien movie. It's still out for several weeks. They do a very nice, sympathetic treatment of John Ronald Rule's
So what about the critic,
relationship with Edith.
the negative critic? What were their issues?
Yeah, mainly he's going to pick apart the stuff that's added in that is filler material because we don't know.
It's great, some continuity.
Yeah, there's a scene where Tolkien is drunk. I mean, I think it's believable
Oh heck yeah!
because
They were drinking.
he's a college student.
Was he hanging out with Azog?
No, but he may have stolen an omnibus. Anyway, I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah.
But it does show the fact that I think what they do, and this is controversial, but they really do emphasize the fact that he came from an underprivileged family situation, and
And
he had
the family didn't want him to marry Edith because of
well, right, but the
Romeo and Juliet?
scholarship that enables him to study at Oxford,
yeah.
and I've
Because
actually
of his condition.
been, I've been at the college in Oxford where Tolkien, enrolled. So I mean, I'm watching this. I'm like, the green space, and the students never walk in it. The professors are allowed to walk across the grass. The students are not allowed to.
Huh.
It's really interesting,
Well, this one.
right? But I would say that yes, they take some liberties, but I think the liberties are very humanizing, very humanizing. So yeah.
Cool.
So we dealt with this.
I can see why the family
One
would
Ring,
be
second edition.
upset about Prussia's grandfather being portrayed as drunk.
We dealt with Amazon News, and we dealt with the Tolkien movie. So before we read the rest of the Tolkien letter, was there anything else Tolkien related that anybody wanted to share?
I'll have to go downstairs and grab my books since
I got
I'm
nothing.
downstairs.
And I brought my paper copy, and I have 2 Kindle versions. So
Oh, okay. Then we'll just use yours.
Should we burn the Kindle of both ends?
somebody put him out of his misery.
You don't want me to burn the Kindle?
Somebody put him out of our misery. That's why they phrase that.
No, the
Punishing.
the parallel
I don't have the letter. I have letters on my phone.
Oh, I'll go get.
the parallel.
Sorry, I was thinking I followed on to them.
Yeah, I'll go get one.
I
Sorry,
still
go
think the parallel to Aeneas about Rome
Yes.
is actually quite a
Rome had a habit of picking anybody who was vaguely important from history and saying, he's a distant ancestor of us. This makes us important.
I need to bone up on my Aeneas mythology. So he was actually at Troy, and then he goes to Rome.
Yeah, he ends up in Italy somewhere.
I would view that with a 2-pound sack of salt.
Well, yeah, but the whole point is back then mythology and history were a little bit not quite as far apart as you know what I'm saying. I don't mean literally it was history, just that back then they considered it history.
I guess
more.
I'm trying to say Romans would take any excuse to make themselves justified in their actions.
No, but
in their authority.
True. I agree with that. But this is actually a really good point, Corey. Thank you for reminding us of this, because from a classical perspective, this is something a lot of people would have known of in the past, and I'm not as well versed in these things. But so it was actually Virgil's Aeneid, which was his Latin epic poem, which is telling the legendary story of Aeneas, a Trojan who traveled to Italy, where he became the ancestor of the Romans.
I think it was originally written in Greek.
Virgil is a Latin writer. How would he originally be writing Greek?
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking of the Iliad.
No, you're right. You're. I think he used sources like that. But the reason why this guy is famous is because of this.
Well, I just think that Tolkien knew classic history, and I don't know why, but I feel like it seems to me like it might have informed Tolkien's way of thinking.
Yes, and Richard, my apologies. So the hero Aeneas was already known to Greco-Roman legend and myth, having been a character in the Iliad. So you're right. But Virgil took the disconnected tales of Aeneas' wanderings and his vague association with the foundation of Rome, and his description as a personage of no fixed characteristics other than a scrupulous pietist, and fashioned the Aeneid into a compelling founding myth or national epic that tied Rome to the legends of Troy, etc.
It's more of a piece of propaganda.
Yeah, but it's a famous piece that has influenced Western civilization.
Wow.
So interesting here.
I'm just saying that because I maybe I'm wrong, but wasn't.
You're always wrong.
I'm always wrong. Yeah.
Except it's not. Go ahead, Corey.
But didn't Tolkien? How do I put this? Didn't his generation spend a lot of time delving into the Greek Latin roots? I mean, nowadays, I'm not saying that you can't go to school for it,
Latin was part of the curriculum.
but that's something that we don't. That might have been done. That wasn't done with a lot of people nowadays. I went to school and it was different. We didn't have to learn Greek and Latin roots.
Right.
But Tolkien's generation, I think that was a huge part of education.
Oh, absolutely it was.
Uphill through the snow both ways.
Yeah, that's right.
No sign of it?
No, I found one. The volunteers kind of organize things a little oddly, so because they don't know Tolkien.
All right, so we're in the fall of Gondolin.
Well, I think we're reading the letters first.
What number?
I just, you know what, I set that up for you for later, Corey.
156.
Sorry, Corey.
Oh.
So we're in the letters first.
Oh, okay.
So we're in letter 150, letter 156.
Okay, for Robert Murray.
And we were partway through it. One moment here. So sent. Okay, so
That's a long one.
Yeah, I know.
That's the letter?
No. 156. We stopped at men have fallen.
Oh, I got a ton of handwritten notes in here. Classifies Lord of the Rings with Homer, Beowulf, Virgil, Greek and Shakespearean tragedy. Faramir's Numenorian Grace. Gandalf is Greek reference words in here.
Darn it.
Numenorian, good religion, Numenorian. Oh, this is from all my Numenorian research. Fall of Numenor summer.
Well, this will be fun because that ties in. This is kind of tying into everything.
Eru and
We've
death.
got the Greek and the Latin, the Virgil and the Homer, and then
This
we also
is about
have
Eru and death and Valar had no authority. And Mount Mindalluin, only kings of Numenor as priesthood. Hallowed place to Eru after the fall of Numenor. No temple to God. So those are all the highlights from that letter.
So let's see how far. 1, 2, 3. Oh, we can finish it today. Yeah,
You think so?
because we've only got 3 pages left.
So where are we leaving?
Men have fallen.
So you're saying it's slightly smaller than the short note?
Yes. Men have fallen.
Okay.
Any legends? Would you like to read this section?
Either or.
Go for it.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Men have fallen. Any legends put in the form of supposed ancient history of this actual world of ours must accept that. But the peoples of the West, the good side, are reformed. That is, they are the descendants of men that tried to repent and fled westward from the domination of the prime Dark Lord and his false worship, and by contrast with the elves, renewed and enlarged their knowledge of the truth and the nature of the world. They thus escaped from religion, in quotes, in a pagan sense, into a pure monotheist world in which all things and beings and powers that might seem worshipful were not to be worshipped, not even the gods, the Valar, being only creatures of the One, and he was immensely remote. The High Elves were exiles from the blessed realm of the gods after their own particular elvish fall, and they had no religion or religious practices, rather. For those had been in the hands of the gods, praising and adoring Eru the One, Iluvatar, the father of all, on the mountain of Aman. The highest kind of men, those of the 3 houses, who aided the elves in the primal war against the Dark Lord, were rewarded by the gift of the land of the star, or Westernest, which equals Numenor, which was most westerly of all mortal lands, and almost in sight of Elvenhome, Eldamar, on the shores of the Blessed Realm. There they became the Numenorians, the kings of men. They were given a triple span of life, but not elvish immortality, which is not eternal, but measured by the duration and time of earth. For the point of view of this mythology is that mortality, or a short span, and immortality, or an indefinite span, was part of what we might call the biological and spiritual nature of the children of God.
I have a question before we get too far in. What does he mean by triple span of life? Does that
They
mean
lived 3 times as long as normal men.
right? So 300 years, or are we talking
Normal men lived about 68 years. Numenorians, unless they were a line of Elendil, lived to be about 242 to 300. The line of Elendil, they could live 500 years on the extreme end. They lived even longer than the other Numenorians. But yeah, in the 200 300 range was pretty average for the Numenorians early on. It changed over time. They became less and less, and then they became more and more obsessed with death and everything. Anyway.
Well, what's interesting about the whole religion, lack of religion in Tolkien, is that because he was already tackling spiritual icons, not icon, I don't know if that's the word I want to use, but religious pictures, I guess you could say.
Iconography.
Yeah, that putting religion in the work itself was too much. But the second part is that he believed that the pagans believed in a monotheistic God, but that the monotheistic God got more and more distant, and the Valar equivalent were more and more worshipped. So the idea was that it's more of a deistic. When I use the word deism here, I'm talking about deism believes that God, this monotheistic God, just kind of wound up the universe and left it running without any involvement beyond letting some secondary power in charge of running the world.
It's like a
Kind of
vice
like
regent or something.
1800s.
Huh?
Kind of like a vice regent or some powers that
Well,
are delegated.
It's more like the 1800s idea of a machine left running.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point, and I know, Corey, you've read quite a bit on this, so I respect your research. It's hard to say. I know Tolkien was influenced a lot by the medieval mindset, and so there is that hierarchical distance that is also achieved by you have such a stratified sense, in terms of you have Middle Earth and Arda, the world, and maybe that's part of the result of the fall for these different races is that if there weren't a fall, I mean, certainly for the elves, when they were in Valinor, they didn't sense as much of a distance because they were in the land of bliss, weren't they? They were where that was more connected.
Right, but there's a Tolkien is trying to take a pagan idea, and what I'm saying is he's doing the best he can at making it a Christian idea, but ultimately the great spirit which was above all the other spirits
right.
is rarely mentioned in Indian lore, except to just say, oh well, there was somebody big enough that created the rest of the gods essentially.
Sure.
And
then they got bored, killed themselves, and split into 7 stones.
Well, the point is that
Marvel reference, sorry.
the smaller gods became very much in man's mind a huge thing, but the big God, the creator God that created everything else, and I'm not even trying to say Christian creator God here.
Sure.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just saying like there was this first thing that created all the littler gods, but for some reason the littler gods, what's the word I want to, crowded out the image of the bigger.
I think what he's got, it's a really good, thank you for that. I think there's these two things he's trying to avoid. Because I think on the one hand, Tolkien does not want to be preachy in any sense.
Right.
He's not looking for an allegory. He wants a unique story, and what appealed most to him about the myths was something that is transcendent. And that's a universal desire.
Wasn't
So,
it the sense of it?
Let me finish my thinking, please. Sorry, only because my brain,
No
I'll
problem.
get derailed easily. So, on the one hand, he doesn't want to get too detailed because he's not trying to necessarily say, oh, and they have churches, etc. Although we see clearly a temple that Sauron sets up on, I mean, so he's trying, I mean, I think he does a great job of describing idolatry or darkness or whatever. But he's got this on the one side of saying, I don't want it to matter too much the primary world too closely. But on the other hand, I don't want this just to end up becoming another pantheon, because I don't think that's what Tolkien is aiming for either. Because he's well steeped in Greek and Latin, Roman and Norse. I mean, this guy knows his mythologies, and he's no ignoramus when it comes to, various religions around the world and time and history and all that. So he doesn't want it just to become another pantheon. So he's trying to occupy this middle space where, kind of like you're saying, Corey, there is the one, Eru, Iluvatar, and yet he's leaving really to these intermediaries, and even those intermediaries are themselves so powerful that
they have intermediaries.
They do, because otherwise, I think his concern, at least mine would be, it lessens the awe and the power derived. Whereas if there's something, if Ulmo shows up all the time, it's like, yo, Ulmo, how's it going, dog? But if Ulmo,
Dolphin be more perfect?
yeah, if Ulmo, who's the one who's the most involved, it seems, in the affairs of elves and men, he meddles, but even his meddling is like, oh wow, he actually shows up. Whoa, okay. You know what I'm saying? And part of Morgoth's problem is that he's like micromanaging everything. Whereas the Valar are like, well, yes, we care and we're not completely distant, but there is a sense in which if they meddle, they will destroy and turn over.
Because they had the previous battles that did.
Well, I think that he
made the planet each time they fought Melkor.
Yeah, bummer, right?
I think you're right. I mean, I think he's trying to occupy that space, but I'm just trying to say is that the religion, he's going off of an idea, and I wish I had the material to read in front of me, but he's going off the idea that every pagan myth has some larger creator god that created all the little gods, and the difference is he's making it so that people like the one with the wind, I'm sorry, the air. Manwe is kind of, he makes this connection, what they call the great chain of being in medieval literature, right?
Sure.
Teleology, whatever. And he's doing that, but there's no religion. I mean, there's no.
We're not worshiping Manwe,
You don't see, well, I mean, men do, but it says they don't do it rightfully, because they don't understand that the powers are not, the elves understand this, but the men, fallen men don't do that. But there's very little religion, because I think it's meant to be a mythopoetic.
Right. Good word there, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's not really, he doesn't really want to, and I think that's the reason why Tolkien appeals to people, because even though there are these symbols, these religious symbols in a lot of his stuff, it doesn't smack of some sort of
Sure. And as a Christian, I mean, I really appreciate his background, but the fact that he's restrained is also a sign of great talent. I'm curious, Hawk, did you have any comments on maybe from what would be maybe more of a Zen perspective on Tolkien, or because you're talking, Corey, about the fact that Tolkien appeals widely.
Yeah, maybe less Zen and more Taoist with the whole, and Shintoist with more of the spirits imbued in the essence of all existence.
Mm-hmm.
Buddhists, it's more all of us as sentient and such, but there's less of the animist part of it, where the Taoist has more of the animist type.
Yeah.
So you certainly see a lot of that kind of showing up in the Middle Earth stuff with the Song of Arda, where there's an essence to everything, even the stones, and you come to this land and tragedy happened here, and it leaves a stain, and the stone of Erech and the people who broke their word and all these other things. You can definitely see that maybe more on if you were trying to, but you would be kind of shoehorning them.
Well, that's the danger, isn't there? Yeah. And everybody would want to take Tolkien and say, he's ours,
Yeah, and I don't think the Taoists would do that.
No.
And it would totally depend on the Buddhist sect if they tried to do it. So,
yeah.
Because all their bodhisattvas and bodhisattvas and all that stuff is
sure
wacky. But he definitely plays around with various paradigms of mythologies of the past in real human experience, and his current belief system, and trying to make all of that kind of be in a workable way in his mythological setting. I think he does it pretty effectively.
Absolutely. I also found interesting. Oh, go ahead.
And that the lesser gods walk amongst us, right, between Gandalf and Saruman and things like that, the good and the bad, as those extra layers of intermediaries and such that were sent on missions.
Exactly, this story.
And they know, they're aware of it, right? These are not like chosen ones or messiahs or anything like that, or neos or what have you. They're literally sent down to be put into physical form and, nudge. They're not allowed to push, but they're allowed to nudge.
Yep.
And that they then fracture.
Yeah.
Right, with Saruman, and who knows what happened with the blue lizards and all of that. So
you were meant to find the ring, which is encouraging.
I think that it was C.S. Lewis that said something about God can only woo, he cannot compel, and so when you say nudge, that's kind of in the vein of wooing instead of compelling. So
definitely not an Old Testament perspective.
So can I actually refer to something else in the letter? So it mentioned Westerness, which I knew somewhere there was a reference. This is not original to Tolkien. He did not invent
he
this.
talks about that.
And that's really interesting too, because he refers to Westerness which goes back to a medieval legend of there being a place called Westerness, which just means Western lands.
Yes.
Could be Cornwall, could be the Isle of Man, somewhere west of England.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that's neat because you look at in the Welsh legends, you've got the island of Summer, and again these whole ideas that somewhere to the west, or Brendan's voyages,
And of course, Numenor is partly his Atlantis mythology.
Yeah.
Which there was just a whole documentary on what probably was Atlantis from Plato's perspective, the Mycenaean whatever island of. I've got it bookmarked on Prime somewhere. I watched the whole thing. It's dramatized. What's that?
Santorini.
Maybe, might be, possibly.
Greek island that blew up.
Yeah.
Santorini.
That they're thinking that that's the most likely between all the evidence and the timing and all the geologic evidence and all that. That it fits.
Well, there's actually been some recent work about the Eye of the Sahara. It's a structure that is perfectly round. It has a spring in the middle.
Well, I think Aquaman definitely builds off that.
I don't know anything about that, but
No,
it's
I
very
mean-
interesting.
Plato described an area that was three rings.
Yeah, they're concentric with water in
concentric
turn.
and
Yeah.
there was a freshwater spring on the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And there's a freshwater spring in the center of the Eye of Sahara.
Yeah.
And it's the right size for what he was talking about. And there's the mountains that he was trying to talk about to the north of it. And actually, if you stylize it, you could take the Eye of Ra and stylize it, and it looked like that area.
But where's the ocean?
Well, I think the idea there is that
The
there
idea
wasn't
is that
inland
Africa is
symbolic
uplifted.
Okay.
in an inland sea. Well, I think there's probably as many theories on where Atlantis I am. I've read some
Sure.
interesting possibilities too.
But anyway,
Wherever it was.
this is Tolkien's variation. Where again, he's making it up, so he gets to do what he
He
wants.
gets to do
with
what
it.
he wants.
Exactly.
But I think it is really neat, though. I mean, what would we have?
And he did a lot of different versions.
Men
too.
of the
West.
West.
Yeah.
You know, this is key to his myth.
Yes.
Okay, carrying on.
So anyway, so that middle of the paragraph that we stopped in was the point of view of this methodology is that mortality or a short span and immortality or an indefinite span was part of what we might call the biological and spiritual nature of the children of God, men and elves, the firstborn respectively, and could not be altered by anyone, even a power or God, and would not be altered by the one, except perhaps by one of those strange exceptions to all rules and ordinances which seem to crop up in the history of the universe, with a capital U, and show the finger of God as the one wholly free will and agent asterisk. The story of Baron and Luthien is the one great exception, as it is the way by which elvishness becomes wound in as a thread in human history. The Numenorians thus began a great new good, and as monotheists, but like the Jews only more so, with only one physical center of worship, the summit of the mountain Meneltarma, pillar of heaven, literally, for they did not conceive of the sky as a divine residence in the center of Numenor, but it had no building and no temple, as all such things had evil associations, because all of Morgoth's stuff had all of that. And it's very interesting that he kind of makes organized religion the boogeyman. But they fell again because of a ban or prohibition inevitably. Don't eat the apple. They were forbidden to sail west beyond their own land because they were not allowed to be or try to be immortal. And in this myth, the Blessed Realm is represented as still having an actual physical existence as a region of the real world, one which they could have reached by ship, being very great mariners. Look at his shirt. While obedient, people from the Blessed Realm often visited them, and so their knowledge and arts reached almost an elvish height.
But the proximity of the blessed realm, the very length of their lifespan given as a reward, and the increasing delight of life made them begin to hanker after immortality. They did not break the ban, but they begrudged it. And forced east, they turned from beneficence in their appearances on the coasts of Middle-earth to pride, desire of power, and wealth. So they came into conflict with Sauron, the lieutenant of the Prime Dark Lord, who had fought... Ooh, Prime. Maybe Amazon shouldn't be making this. the lieutenant of the Prime Dark Lord, who had fallen back into evil and was claiming both kingship and godship over men of Middle Earth.
I think we're safe until Amazon starts putting up temples.
Well, I know Google got rid of the
Fulfillment
mantra.
centers.
Google got rid of,
Sorry.
Google got rid of the mantra, don't be evil.
Yeah, that's not good either.
No, that's bad.
That's very
That's
bad.
evil.
Yeah. We don't need that motto anymore. Why?
Become
Darn
one with the evilness.
Oh dear. Let's see here. Sorry. I'm the one that got us off on that. Let's see. Prime Dark Lord, yes. Who had fallen back into evil and was claiming both kingship and godship over men of Middle Earth. It was on the kingship question that Ar-Pharazôn the 13th and mightiest king of Numenor challenged him primarily. His armada that took haven at Umbar was so great, and the Numenorians at their height so terrible and resplendent, that Sauron's servants deserted him. So Sauron had recourse to guile. He submitted and was carried off to Numenor as a prisoner hostage.
Yeah. He just surrendered. He's just like, okay, I get it. You got me.
They're too fabulous for his shirt.
Yeah, there you go. But he was, of course, a divine person in the terms of this mythology, a lesser member of the race of Valar, and thus far too powerful to be controlled in this way. He steadily got Ar-Pharazôn's
And
mind.
he's still, at this point, still in his fair guise.
Yes. And
So you look like Fabio.
is this before or after? This is before the creation of the rings, correct? Or
No, he was
This is
still
after.
in fair form when he taught the elves.
Avatar. Okay.
Well, okay, so
I
Avatar.
got this confused last time.
Me too, yeah.
Maybe if somebody's online, they can look it up. Trying to remember which happens first.
So is this
Morgoth teaches the elves. I don't remember.
No. We're talking about
When
Sauron
was
teaching
Avatar taught the elves.
the elves in
power of
Holland.
thinking.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. With Celebrimbor.
Yeah.
That's in the second age.
Yeah.
No, it's in the third age, isn't it?
No.
No, he
second
makes it in the
age.
second age.
Yeah. This is, and he's still in his fair form, right? Because they followed him. Because
So
he
it was
fair
before,
form.
because
It
the
had to be
end,
'cause he's in his fair form.
and because the second age ends with the
Yeah.
fall of.
And they didn't know he was making the ring secret at the same time.
So the rings are already made at this point.
Yeah, well, the second age doesn't quite end,
Well,
but
okay,
it's close
technically,
to it. It gets close
technically-
to it.
the second age ends with the establishment of Gondor with the survivors after the fall of Numenor. Pretty sure.
Well, isn't it when they go to Mordor and take the ring and all that? Isn't that the end of the second age?
I don't know.
Wow, we're slacking on our scholarship.
I believe that's third age.
Well, all right, that was the end of the second age and the end of the third age.
When
Was the last
Isildur gets
union,
killed,
right? The last union of men and
the last alliance. Yeah, you're right.
that was
Gotta
the
be
end,
in
which
third
was
age.
some centuries after the fall of Numenor.
True.
Yeah,
But the main
because I
question
think it was
is,
second age 2600, 2500 when Numenor fell, and then it wasn't until 3000 or so that the second age ended.
oh,
So a few hundred years, because it took time.
so
for
then
them
that
to
still
build the
doesn't answer
spirit.
our question.
The rings were
Yes, it
not
does.
made
Yes, it
during the
does.
second.
They were made in the second age.
Yes, they were.
So as Anatar, as the Lord of Gifts, he taught the elves. He kissed up to them and everything.
Well,
and,
then was
and
the
they made the rings, and he had the ring.
Okay.
And he's taken to Numenor, and over time as a prisoner, he slowly whispers poison in Ar-Pharazôn Golden's ear, and slowly makes it as Ar-Pharazôn starts to get old and become afraid of old age, because by now the Numenorians have become death worshippers, right? They made huge caverns. They put all their wealth into the funeral caves of all their people and stuff, and they were much more about
All right.
death than life.
So he's helped them to create the greater rings in about second age 1500, and
Right.
he creates the one ring around 1600.
Right. Yeah, which is long before the fall of that's like 1,000 years difference. So now he's prison. So then he slowly talks them into worship. He's like, well, you know who will give you immortality? That's my master Morgoth. So let's create those temples and start doing sacrifices of the Elendil's faithful, and start burning them at the temples, and the smokes burned constantly and darkened and sooted up the temple. All that.
Second age
Remember, I did a
3319.
lot of Numenor research.
Second age 3319 is the fall of
Is the fall.
Numenor.
Oh, 3319 is the
Yeah,
fall of Numenor?
33.
Oh, that's
So-
a lot later.
So we're talking to 1500 years earlier
Okay.
is when he makes the rings.
Yeah, okay. So then
And the war was at the end.
Okay, so when does the second age end?
When it feels like it.
When the third age starts.
Because I thought there was I thought there was a gap, because I always was thinking it was fall Numenor, but I thought there was a gap after that stuff happened.
Yeah, you're right. Stuff happened.
Stuff happened.
Stuffing.
There were people, they disagreed, stuff happened.
Okay. The War of the Elves is Sauron. That's a different one.
The Last Alliance.
Oh, yeah, I know. Okay, I should just look that up.
We should have this memorized.
That worked really
You know what I
bad.
need to do? I have RPG.education. I need to make a whole Tolkien course. So we just refresh for ourselves because it sets up quizzes.
3430.
Okay, so it's about 400 years later.
Yeah.
Okay. I knew there was like a few 100-year gap.
Okay, so
Because
explain
it
it
takes
to
time
me
to
because I just didn't follow
Okay.
that.
He's prisoner in Numenor. He talks off Arizona.
Right.
Into worshiping Morgoth.
Right.
The faithful, well, first the
Yep.
few remaining
Yeah, it's kind of
Moses leave
Yep.
because the earth felt unsteady under their feet. Elendil's people start getting ready to go.
I
They're
can
having
read it.
visions
It's
and
right in the
such.
letter here.
Oh, it's all described.
Yeah, it's all described.
Please keep reading.
Sorry.
Oh,
I know. We're trying to rehearse this because we need to remember. But then
I wrote several modules on this time period. I wrote an entire module on the fall of Numenor.
Yeah, which you know really well. It's just hard to remember how all these other events relate to it. So Sauron had recourse to God. He submitted, was carried off to Numenor. He steadily got Ar-Pharazôn's mind under his own control,
Okay.
and in the event corrupted many of the Numenoreans, destroyed the conception of Eru, now represented as a mere figment of the Valar, or Lords of the West, a fictitious sanction to which they appealed if anyone questioned their rulings,
It made them believe they were being imprisoned and that
Yes.
they were being cheated.
and substituted a Satanist religion with a large temple, the worship of the dispossessed eldest of the Valar, the rebellious Dark Lord of the First Age, not named here, but we know it's Morgoth. He finally induces Ar-Pharazôn, frightened by the approach of old age, to make the greatest of all armadas, and go up with war against the blessed realm itself, and wrest it and its immortality into his own hands.
And I showed you guys that artwork class model.
Yes. The Valar had no real answer to this monstrous rebellion, for the children of God were not under their ultimate jurisdiction. They were not allowed to destroy them or coerce them with any divine display of the powers they held of the physical world. They appealed to God, and a catastrophic change of plan occurred. At the moment the Ar-Pharazôn set foot on the forbidden shore, a rift appeared. Numenor foundered and was utterly overwhelmed. The Armada was swallowed up, and the blessed realm removed forever from the circles of the physical world. Thereafter, one could sail right round the world and never find it.
I had the image of the Titanic
And
when you.
Sauron's fair form was destroyed, and he can never take on that form again.
Yes. Did you want to read?
No.
Okay. Did you want to read? Sure.
Too bad.
Snarky. So ended is the next word. If you can read it.
Snarky, sharky.
It's very
Snark.
small.
But Snarky is so fun.
You can zoom in if you need to.
So ended Numenor Atlantis in all its glory. But in a kind of Noachian situation, a small party of the faithful in Numenor, who refused to take Pan in the rebellion, though many of them have been sacrificed in the temple by the Sauron, escaped in 9 ships under the leadership of Arendelle
Thanks.
You want one of those?
Yeah.
and his son Isildur and Anari,
Yeah, oh yeah.
and established a kind of diminished memory of Numenor in exile on the coasts of Middle-earth, inheriting the hatred of Sauron, the friendship of the elves, the knowledge of the true God, and less happily the yearnings for longevity, and the habit of embalming and building a splendid tomb. They're only hollows, or almost so. But the hollow of God and the mountain had perished, and there was no real substitute. So also when the kings came to an end, there was no equivalent to a priesthood, the two being identical in Numerian ideas.
Interesting.
So when God, Eru, was a datum of good, datum? Numerian philosophy, and a prime fact of their conception in history, he had at a time of the War of the Ring no worship and no hallowed place. And that kind of negative truth was characteristic of the West and all the area under Numerian influence. The refusal to worship any creature, and above all, no dark lord or satanic demon, Sauron or any other, was almost as far as they got. Which kind of reminds me of the Cold War and the United States trying to pass off this anti-communist quasi-religion thing that led to a lot of bad things. They had, I imagine, no penitentiary prayers to God, but preserved the vestige of thanksgiving. Those under special elvish influence might call on angelic powers for help in immediate peril or fear of evil enemies. There's a footnote there. It later appears that there had been a hallow on Midollorin.
Mindolvine?
Mindolin?
Oh, the mountain behind
Mindalluin.
behind
The Halloween of Mindalluin, yeah.
Only approachable by the king, where he had anciently offered thanks and praise on behalf of his people. But it had been forgotten. It was re-entered by Aragon, and there he found the sapling of the white tree.
Right.
Yeah.
I've forgotten that that was
Yep.
why that place was up there.
And replanted it in the court of the fountain. It is to be presumed that with the reemergence of the lineal priest kings, whom Lutheran, the blessed Elfman, was a forerunner,
I'm just
the
curious.
worship of God would be renewed and his name or title be again more often heard, but there would be no temple of the true God while the Numerian influence lasted.
I just really want to, because there was a mispronunciation that completely changes the meaning of what he was saying. I just got to bring it up. You said there was no penitentiary prayers to God,
I was guessing.
petitionary
Petitioner.
prayers to God. Just important because it's punishment versus petitioning.
It depends on your point of
Changes for
view.
those who might be listening on a podcast or something.
It depends on your point of view.
Corey, you had a question?
Sometimes I don't even know why I try. I never know what it is I wanted to say because you guys end up going down something and I always forget. And it's
Rabbit
okay.
trails? Okay.
It's fine.
If you think of it,
If it was that important, I guess I can.
From a certain point of view, it's true.
Okay. Carry on.
Carry on.
Corey gets the next turn for comment.
But
After you read.
Doesn't matter.
who's this Corey?
Wait a minute. Go back and
But let's get through this.
Yep.
if we
But
can.
they were still living on the borders of myth, or rather the story exhibits myth passing into history or the domain of man. For of course the shadow will arise again in a sense, as is clearly foretold by Gandalf, that never again, unless it be before the great end, will an evil demon be incarnate as a physical enemy.
Mm-hmm.
He will direct man in all the complications of half evils and defective goods, in the twilights of doubt as to side such situations as he most loves. You can see them already arising in the War of the Ring, which is by no means so clear-cut an issue as some critics have averred. These will be and are our more difficult fate. But if you imagine people in such a mythical state, in which evil is largely incarnate, in which physical resistance to it is a major act of loyalty to God, I think you would have the good people in just such a state. Concentrated on the negative, the resistance to the false, while the truth remained more historical and philosophical than religious. That's a paragraph breaker if you wanted to.
Oh, sure. Corey, why don't you read? Any comments? I don't have any.
Okay. You get half a sentence.
But wizards.
Wizards.
How do you turn the page on that thing?
You have to shrink it down and then swipe to the side.
Okay. Wizards are not in any sense or degree shady. Not mine. I am under the.
Once we
Something.
saw a lady laugh. Oops.
Finding
Moving on.
For an extra $39, you can pay them
finding English names for mythological creatures with other names, since people would not take a string of Elvish names. And what? Did I mess up something here?
It starts so small. I'm not sure.
No,
I'll
it's
load
okay.
it onto my Kindle next time. You want me to?
Want me to read?
Yeah, you want to read from the book?
Yeah. I'm just
Where is supposed to be?
Great.
Corey.
There you go.
He's just not
Oh.
a truly dedicated scholar who can read on miniature cell phones.
Yeah, I'll just become blind within a few years.
Well, wizards are not in any degree or sense or degree shady, not mine. I'm under the difficulty of finding English names for the mythological creatures with other names, since people would not take a string of elvish names, and I would rather they took my legendary creatures, even with the false associations of the translation, than not at all. So he was saying that people wouldn't enjoy his
Feel like reading a
Yeah,
Russian
Elvish.
novel where you lose track of who's who because it's in Russian.
yeah. Even the dwarfs are not really Germanic dwarfs. Dwargus, Dvergar. And I call them dwarves to mark that. They are not naturally evil, not necessarily hostile, and not a kind of maggot folk bred in stone, but a variety of incarnate rational creature. The Istatari are translated wizards because of the connection of wizard with wise, and so with witting and knowing. They are actually emissaries from the true West, and so immediately, not immediately, but mediately, however he said it, from God, sent precisely to strengthen the resistance of the good when the Valar became aware of the shadow of Sauron is taking shape.
So they meddle.
Thank you.
Is it metal or tinker?
Any last comments? Because I'd love to read a little bit of Fall of Gondolin before the end.
Before the end?
The end before the end.
The end of the world.
End of it.
End of the world. That's
And I feel fine. Free out, extreme erotic and emotional.
End of the world at 10, film at 11.
So page 76, this is the fashion.
You guys have a copy now?
We do?
Yes, you do. I have your paper. No. We're on to the Fall of Gondolin now.
Oh.
We're switching books, Corey. Keep
Ah,
up.
gosh.
Here, hand me that.
This
one.
was the fashion.
Yes, that's where we are. And I do have here. If you wait a moment there, Richard, I think I can hook you up with a copy.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'll just listen.
Oh, I think I remember what I was going to say was that they, the Numenorians were told by Sauron essentially that God was holding out on them
For immortality.
for immortality
Jealousy.
because they didn't understand. I think it was it C.S. Lewis that said that if men were truly clean on the inside, good people, that we wouldn't fear death even if God required it of us. And that men in this sense have taken up the fear that comes from Sauron spitting in their ears, the fact that life dying and the forgetting of that the world is going to be remade. You know what I'm saying? Is there's no discussing of what exactly the world being remade means. There's very little in Tolkien's work about what it means that the world is going to be remade.
Oh, it should be in the future.
It's pretty hard to
There's
conceptualize.
the other remaking
I've got it all
details.
ready for you.
Which remaking are we talking about?
So each time they have the battles and such and the world gets destroyed.
No.
remade,
This is
they've never done
the
it.
remaking that comes after the end of the Third
Yeah.
Age.
Right.
The remaking of the world was intended to say
Yeah.
that it was supposed to be a parallel to saying what the new heaven and the new earth that existed in Revelation.
Sure.
The idea that the earth would somehow be restored to some sort of
Which is, of course,
Edenic. Yeah.
Tolkien would say that's the ultimate catastrophe, because the destruction or the apocalypse is then followed by necessarily a rebirth of the world. Well, if we could, thank you, Corey, for that. Let's go ahead and this was the fashion. And would you like to read
What
some
page
more?
are we on?
76.
76. This was the fashion is the beginning of the paragraph.
This was the fashion, and the array of the 11 houses of the Gondolin, with their signs and emblems, and the bodyguard of Tour, the folk of the wing, was accounted the 12th. Now is the face of that chieftain grim, and he looks not to live long. And there in his house upon the walls, Idril arrays herself in mail, and seeks Earendel. And that child was in tears, for the strange lights of red that played about the walls of the chamber where he slept, and tales that his nurse Melith had woven him concerning fiery Melko, at times of his waywardness, came to him and troubled him. But his mother, coming, set about him a tiny coat of mail that she had let fashion in secret. And at that he was glad and exceeding proud, and he shouted for pleasure. Yet Idril wept.
Is this possibly the source for the male shirt that was given to Frodo?
That's what I wondered too. But he doesn't have this in the later versions.
Yeah, so who knows?
So yeah.
For much had she cherished in her heart the fair city and her goodly house, and the love of Tour and herself that had dwelt therein. But now she saw its destroying nigh at hand, and feared that her contriving would fail against this overwhelming might of the terrors of the serpents. It was now 4 hours still from the middle of night, and the sky was red in the north and in the east and west, and those serpents of iron had reached the levels of Tumladen, and those fiery ones were among the lowest slopes of the hills, so that the guards were taken and set in evil torment by the Balrogs that scoured all about, saving only to the furthest south, where was Christhorn the clefted eagles. Then did King Turgon call a council, and thither fared Tur and Meglin as royal princes. And Dúlin came with Egalmoth and Penla the Tall, and Rog strode thither with Galdor of the Tree, and Golden Glorfindel and Ecthelion of the Voice of Music. Thither too fared Sulgant, a tremble at the tidings, and other nobles beside of less blood but better heart. Then spoke Tur, and this was his rede, that a mighty sally be made forthwith, ere the light and heat grew too great in the plain. And many backed him, being but of different minds as to whether the sally should be made by the entire host with the maids and wives and children of midmost, or by diverse bands seeking out in many directions, and to this last Tur leaned. But Meglin and Stalgant alone held other counsel, and were for holding to the city and seeking to guard those treasures that lay within. Out of guile did Meglin speak thus, fearing lest any of the Nodoli escape the doom that he had brought upon them, and he dreaded lest his treason become known, and somehow vengeance find him in the afterdays. The Salgant spoke both echoing Meglin and being grievously afraid of issuing from the city, for he was fain rather to do battle from an impregnable fortress than to risk hard blows upon the field.
Yes, Richard.
I'm kind of remembering. I'm not really sure how he's seen this working out. It's like that time with in the Marvel universe where they go to Loki and said, "What were you thinking? There's no way this works out well for you," you know, kind of thing. And he's kind of in the same situation. There's no way you're getting the girl.
Yeah, Michael's still thinking, I'm going to get Idril for myself, right?
Yeah, it's just.
So the spelling is just a thing from his first draft or whatever.
This is earlier, yes.
So instead of spelling it Maeli,
Yes.
Li. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of the names are a little bit different. By the way, interesting fact, the Battle of Gondolin is one paragraph in this chapter in the Silmarillion. Because everything up to it is the leading up to this point where they're being assailed. And Maglin's kind of deal that he makes, that he should be, he's promised the lordship of Gondolin as his vassal, as Morgoth's vassal, the possession of Idril Celebrimbor. So he'll be the lord of Gondolin, and he will have Idril Celebrimbor when the city should be taken. And then there's one paragraph about this battle, and then afterwards about, well, technically the second paragraph is like the escape. So you could say 2 paragraphs about, no, I guess it's more. So basically, yeah, it goes, it's about 4 or 5 paragraphs showing how they escape, but really only 1 paragraph for the entire battle. I just wanted to point that out because this version we're reading right now, this earlier version, is much more detailed.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, sorry.
You mean the one that's in the second part of this book?
Yes, because that's not the one
That was what I noticed, that
Christopher.
when I finished reading it, one was detailed on the back end, and then the other was detailed on the front end.
Right, good point.
So glue them together.
Exactly.
Then the Lord of the house of the mole played upon the one weakness of Turgon, saying, Lo, O king, the city of Gondolin contains a wealth of jewels and metals and stuffs, and of things wrought by the hands of the gnomes to surpassing beauty. And all these, thy lords, more brave meseems than wise, would abandon to the foe. Even should victory be thine upon the plain, thy city will be sacked, and the Balrogs get hence with a measureless booty. And Turgon groaned, for Meglin had known his great love for the wealth and loveliness of that bird upon Amon-Gwerth. Again said Meglin, putting fire in his voice, Lo, hast thou for naught labored through years uncounted in the building of walls and impregnable thickness, and in the making of gates whose valor might not be overthrown? Is the power of the hill Amon-Gwerth become as lowly as the deep vale, or the hoard of weapons that lie upon it, and its unnumbered arrows of so little worth, that in the hour of peril thou wouldst cast all aside, and go naked into the open against enemies of steel and fire, whose trampling shakes the earth, and the encircling mountains ring with the clamor of their footsteps?
He's right, you should at least put on a cloak.
Well, I was thinking that sounded a little bit like those Norwegians taking their strength of the bear alcohol or whatever it was before they go into battle, right?
Berserkers,
Yeah.
Are you talking about the
Well,
Norse?
in this case, it's mostly almost the opposite. Like if you go forward, you're more of you're nothing, because then you're stupid to have made all these things. But he says more nicely than that.
Aren't the shining baubles more important than your life?
And Salgant quailed to think of it, and spoke noisily, saying, Meglin speaks well, O king, hear thou him. Then the king took the counsel of those twain, though all the lords said otherwise, nay, rather the more for that. Therefore at his bidding does all that folk abide now the assault upon their walls. But Tuor wept, and left the king's hall, and gathering the men of the wing, went through the streets seeking his home. And by that hour was the light great and lurid, and there was stifling heat, and a black smoke and stench arose about the pathways to the city.
P.U.
And now came the monsters across the valley, and the white towers of Gondolin reddened before them. But the stoutest were in dread, seeing those dragons of fire, and those serpents of bronze and iron that fare already about the hill of the city. And they shot unavailing arrows at them. Then is there a cry of hope, for behold, the snakes of fire may not climb the hill for its steepness and for its glassiness, and by reason of the quenching waters that fall upon its sides. Yet they lie about its feet, and a vast steam arises, where the streams of Amon-Gwerth and the flames of the serpents drive together. Then grew there such a heat that women became faint, and men sweated to weariness beneath their mail, and all the springs of the city, save only the fountain of the king, grew hot and smoked. But now Gothmog, lord of Balrogs, captain of the hosts of Melko, took counsel and gathered all his things of iron that could coil themselves around and above all obstacles before them. These he bade pile themselves before the northern gate, and behold, their great spires reached even to its threshold, and thrust at the towers and bastions about it. And by reason of the exceeding heaviness of their bodies, those gates fell, and great was the noise thereof. Yet the most of the walls around them still stood firm. Then the engines and the catapults of the king poured darts and boulders and molten metals on those ruthless beasts, and their hollow bellies clanged beneath the buffeting. Yet it availed not, for they might not be broken, and the fires rolled off them. Then were the topmost opened about their middles, and an innumerable host of the orcs, the goblins of hatred, poured therefrom into the breach. And who shall tell of their scimitars, or the flash of their broad-bladed spears with which they stabbed? And that, by the way, is a little bit maybe another of a Trojan reference, possibly. Richard, you want to take a turn?
I can't believe Gothmog actually became a character of like he gets like 3 words in the Silver. I'm just saying, but
Yeah.
I mean I'm over exaggerating, but he's actually at the head of the
He's the
deal.
quarterback.
He's kind of like the bad guy.
He's calling the shots.
I have a question that just occurred to me. The Balrog that Gandalf stumbled over in the Mine of Moria, was he asleep at this time?
No.
Was he not involved in this battle?
He would have been one that fled at the time of the Great Sundering.
Mm-hmm.
So this is still First Age, isn't it? So at the end of the First Age, there's the whole sinking of Beleriand, which is when a lot of that's when a lot of these Balrogs would have either perished or fled.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I believe, when at the end of the First Age, beginning of the Second Age, any surviving would have crept down into deep places. So, as far as I know.
So he was at this battle, or he was
Probably at the battle. I can't imagine why he would keep any back. Yeah, I think he would have unleashed all.
Oh, I was thinking maybe if that particular Balrog was a deserter.
Well, in a sense, yes. Only because after this successful battle, you have eventually all of them are overthrown. So anyway, go ahead, Richard.
Okay. Then did Rog shout with a mighty voice, and all the people of the Hammer of Wrath, and the kindred of the tree with Galdor, the valiant, leapt at the foe. There the blows of their great hammers and the dint of their clubs rang to the encircling mountains, and the orcs fell like leaves. And those of the swallow and the arch poured arrows like dark rains of autumn upon them, like we saw yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And both orcs and Gondolithum fell there under for the smoke and confusion. Great was that battle, yet for all their valor the Gondolithum, by reason of the might of ever-increasing numbers, were borne slowly backwards till the goblins held part of the northmost city. At this was kind of what I was saying. Some of this language is a little clumsy or archaic.
Well, it's intentionally archaic because he was trying to do it in the Homerian style.
Right, and I'm not finding it easy to read.
You want
A lot of people struggle with Silmarillion to that style.
Do you want me to read?
I don't know, are you capable?
Yeah. At this time is Tour at the head of the folk of the wing, struggling in the turmoil of the streets. And now he wins through to his house and finds that Meglin is before him. Trusting in the battle now begun about the northern gate and in the uproar in the city, Meglin had looked to this hour for the consummation of his desires. Learning much of the secret delving.
You just hear in the depths of the city and underneath the cling of the bronze dragons, you hear
Maniacal laugh.
Yes, learning much of the secret delving of Tuvar, yet only at the last moment had he got this knowledge, and he could not discover all. He said not to the king or any other, for it was his thought that of a surety that tunnel would go in the end toward the way of escape, this being the most nigh to the city, and he had a mind to use this to his good and to the ill of the Noldi.
See, he made an assumption and then made an ass out of
The messengers by great stealth he dispatched to Malco to set a guard about the outer issue of the way when the assault was made, but he himself thought now to take Arendelle and cast him into the fire beneath the walls. Wow. Whew. Isn't Arendelle a young child at this point?
Oh yeah.
Oh
it.
man.
It's kind of like the practice of a lion killing the cubs of a competitor.
Yeah.
and seizing Israel, he would constrain her to guide him to the secrets of the passage, that he might win out of this terror of fire and slaughter, and drag her withal along with him to the lands of Melko. Now Meglin was afeared that even the secret token which Melko had given him would fail in that direful sack, and was mindful to help that Anu to the fulfillment of his promises of safety. No doubt had he, however, of the death of Tur in the great burning, for to Saligant he had confided the task of delaying him in the king's hall, and egging him straight thence into the deadliest of the fight. But lo, Saligant fell into a terror unto death, and he rode home and lay there now a quake on his bed. But Tuor fared home with the folk of the wing. I'm a little having a hard time following this.
You want me to read next, or did you want to read next?
Any next?
Now Tuor did this is where we are.
Like I said, the language is archaic and it doesn't flow like I'm used to.
Lost the page.
Well, this,
no, okay.
I think because this was a first draft or whatever, there is a little bit of hard
Sure,
reading
yeah,
there.
hasn't refined it,
And,
yeah.
and he's intentionally using present tense to describe a past
Yes.
event, which is a particular kind of
Archaic style.
archaic style. It's in Greek. There is such a
Well,
thing
it's
where
because you're telling the story to help evoke the
Yes.
image exact now.
we
even though
think
it's
once
in the
upon a
past.
time, but there's that
Yeah.
style of more like, and then you see. him
Yes,
coming through the-
exactly.
Right.
Which Tor does nicely.
Right.
Now Tuor did this, though his valor leapt to the noise of war, that he might take farewell of Idril and Earendel, and speed them with a bodyguard down the secret way, ere he returned himself to the battle throng to die, must be. But he found a press of the mole folk about his door, and these were the grimmest and least good-hearted of the folk that Meglin might get in that city. Yet were they free Nodoli, and under no spell of Melko's like their master. Wherefore, though for the lordship of Meglin they aided not Idril, no more would they touch of his purpose despite all his curses. Now then Meglin had Idril by the hair, and sought to drag her to the battlements out of cruelty of heart, though she might see the fall of Earendel to the flames. But he was cumbered by that child, and she fought. Alone she was, like a tigress, for all her beauty and slenderness. Wow. There he now struggles, and delays amid oaths, while that folk of the wing draws nigh. And lo! Tuor gives a shout so great that the orcs hear it afar, and waver at the sound of it. Like a crash of tempest, the guard of the wing were amid the men of the mole, and these were stricken asunder. When Meglin saw this, he would stab Earendel with a short knife he had, but that child bit his left hand.
Yeah!
And his teeth sank in, and he staggered and stabbed weakly. And the mail of the small coat turned the blade aside.
Yeah,
There it is.
There
it is.
The mythical coat.
Tuor was upon him, and his wrath was terrible to see. He seized Meglin by that hand that held the knife, and broke the arm with the wrench. And then, taking him by the middle, leapt with him upon the walls and flung him far out.
Dude, wow.
Great was the fall of his body, and it smote upon Amangwerth 3 times ere it pitched in the midmost of the flames. And the name of Meglin has gone out in shame from among Eldar and Nodoli.
Oh boy.
Then the
There's
warriors.
some martial arts going on there.
I want to see this.
Then the warriors of the mole, being more numerous than those few of the wing, and loyal to their lord, came at Tuor. And there were great blows, but no man might stand before the wrath of Tuor. And they were smitten, and driven to fly into what dark holes they might, or flung from the walls. When Tuor and his men must get them to the battle of the gate, for the noise of it had grown very great, and Tuor has it still in his heart that the city may stand. Yet with Idril he left there Varonway against his will, and some other swordsman to be guard for her, till he returned or might send tidings from the fray. Now was the battle at that gate very evil indeed, and Duelin of the Swallow, as he shot from the walls, was smitten by a fiery bolt of the Balrogs, who leapt about the base of Amon-Gwerth. And he fell from the battlements and perished. Then the Balrogs continued to shoot darts of fire and flaming arrows like small snakes into the sky, and these fell upon the roofs and gardens of Gondolin, till all the trees were scorched, and the flowers and grass burned up, and the whiteness of those walls and colonnades was blackened and seared. Yet a worse matter was it, that a company of those demons climbed upon the coils of the serpents of iron, and thence loosed unceasingly from their bows and slings, till a fire began to burn in the city to the back of the main army of the defenders. Then said Rog in a great voice, "Who now shall fear the Balrogs for all their terror? See before us the accursed ones who for ages have tormented the children of the Nodoli, and who come now set a fire in our backs with their shooting. Come ye of the hammer of wrath, and we will smite them for their evil." Thereupon he lifted his mace, and its handle was long, and he made a way before him by the wrath of his onset, even unto the fallen gate. But all the people of the stricken anvil ran behind like a wedge, and sparks came from their eyes for the fury of their rage. A great deed was that sally, for as the Nodoli sing yet, and many of the orcs were borne backward into the fires below. But the men of Rog leapt even upon the coils of the serpents, and came at those Balrogs, and smote them grievously. What's that?
Come at me, bro.
Yeah. For all they had whips of flame and claws of steel, and were in stature very great. They battered them into naught, or, catching at their whips, wielded these against them, that they tore them even as they had aforetime torn the gnomes. And the number of Balrogs that perished was a marvel and dread to the hosts of Melko, for ere that day never had any of the Balrogs been slain by the hand of elves or men.
And of course, these are smaller. I think we talked about last time. Smaller
Yeah.
Balrogs. That later on, they kind of
Smaller Balrogs. It's only three. What is it they say in Dune when they're talking about the worms? I have a small version of it, only 300 meters or something like that.
Wow.
So should we leave it there?
Yeah, let's leave it there. Yeah, we're out of time.
Tune in next time to find out what happens to our glorious hero.
Cool.
Whose book? Is this yours, Brian?
Yes, it is. So we stop at Lengothmog.
Yipper.
Well, can do a name.
Sneaky, sneaky, you'll catch me.
Somebody's been watching some weird shows.
All right.
That sounds like the meat creeps.
I was doing a variation as fast can be, you'll never catch me.
Yeah, Gingerbread Man.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I was doing a jackalope, but okay.
Okay.
Not
It
my
predates
gumdrop
that.
buttons.
Log predates the gingerbread man, but
What?
the jackalope?
What?
Doesn't it?
Wait,
No, I
wait.
mean as far as that version of the gingerbread
Oh,
man.
you know, maybe. What's
As
the
far as-
jackalope? Like what version?
That's the rabbit with the.
Yeah, I know what that is,
things.
but is there a recording of the can't
Oh, it was a comedian like,
Oh.
from the 80s or something. So. Anyway.
I don't know how old the Can't
That,
Catch Me
that
is.
tone was sounding like Rick and Morty. They did this
That
thing
was
on meat
The
creeps.
gingerbread man doing that version, doing it in that voice. That was what? That was Mike Myers, the ogre,
Oh, Shrek?
Shrek. Yeah.
Oh no, it predates that.
Oh, there's a different. Okay.
Pretty sure.
Okay. Well, yeah. No, there's other versions of gingerbread man. I just in that
What was
pure
it?
voice.
It's not my gumdrop
Yeah,
buttons.
Well, I'll say this: you were doing an impression of Mike Myers.
I was doing an impression of another comedian.
Another comedian.
Jackalope.
Okay, so it was a good impression of my comedian's better than your comedian.
Yes, Mike Myers was way funnier than the comedian that did the Jackalope one. Definitely.
Well, I don't know.
Way.
Wait. So the next meeting is June.
Yes. And then you'll have to run it without me in July
Yeah, okay.
because I'll be down in Nolans.
And it always goes so well when you're not here.
It's always good to be. It's always good to be eight below sea level. It's always good to know that the levees are high above your head
With
there.
the living I'm going to be in food and jazz blues heaven.
Oh, the levy breaks?
I'm going to be gone on the third Saturday in June.
Oh,
So it'll be June 15th. You'll be doing it without me.
fair is fair, right?
Yeah, right.
You'll do it without me in
I'll do it
July.
without you in July.
Turnabout's fair play. That's how we
I'll be at a
support
wedding.
each other through this.
I'll be at a wedding in June,
Oh, there
on
you
June
go.
15th.
There you go. And then you'll be,
And you'll be at a wedding. Yeah.
well, that's
Will you
fourth,
be?
but yeah.
Yes.
All right. Anything else you guys want to do before we hang up on everybody? The crowds of people watching.
I got that reference. Lee Majors.
Nope. Okay. Goodbye.
Come on again.
PoetScholars.org. Ciao.